"Have you been sleeping well?" Rachna ma'am asked, her brows furrowing with worry. I nodded and quickly stifled a yawn. She smiled. "It's important to get a good night's sleep, Naina," she said. "A growing kid like you needs it the most." I nodded again. "Is anything bothering you?" She looked concerned. "Yes, ma'am. A half-faced woman comes and puts her terrifying head on the foot of my bed every night. Of course, you would totally believe me if I said that, and not just give me even more powerful medicines." I shook my head. Good girls should know when to keep their mouths shut. "This is a safe space," she added. "You can say whatever you want here. No judgments." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just a little tired is all." "So how are things in school?" she asked, changing the topic. "Are the kids treating you well?" "It's the same, really," I replied. "Some of them oink at me and ask me where Piggy is, make fun of my imaginary friend, but I don't respond." "And why is that?" she asked, waiting for me to give my rehearsed answer. "Because giving them any reaction only empowers them and shows them that they are getting to me," I answered dutifully. "And how does it make you feel when you think of Rukmini now?" she inquired after a couple of seconds. I shrugged. "Naina," she insisted. I know she's not real," I lied again. "I just wish I could be normal, like the others." "But you are normal, Naina," she corrected me. "Having an illness doesn't make you abnormal. It just means you're not well. And just like any other illness, this too can be treated, okay?" "Not all diseases are curable, though, are they?" I looked at the watch behind her. "Can I go now, ma'am?" I asked impatiently. "Yes," she sighed. "We'll continue this day after tomorrow, okay?" I nodded and began to leave. "Don't forget to sleep, Naina," she called out as I left the room. "Rest is important." My time with Rachna ma'am always feels both painfully long and astonishingly short at the same time. I really don't know how else to say it. Every moment sitting there and talking to her feels stretched out, like chewing gum, but at the same time, when it's over, I'm left wondering, how did all that time go by so fast? It's a very disconcerting feeling. She was right that I wasn't getting any sleep. I've just been too terrified of being erased by the strange woman to be getting any sleep at all. If it hadn't been for short naps in classes, my eyes would have melted in their sockets by now. I dread going to my room now, even during the day. There's this heavy feeling I get when I'm there, as if my heart is going to sink into my chest. And it's like the air is thicker somehow, if that makes any sense. I'm sure Rachna ma'am would say that it's all in my head, and maybe it is just my fear, because I certainly didn't feel this way when I didn't know the half-faced woman was real, but I really don't like my room anymore. I've started spending most of my free time in the library, doing my homework and getting some light reading done. Some of you suggested trying to talk to that thing, but I'm sorry. It's just too scary. I can't even stand to look at that ugly face, much less try and talk to it. After school got over and I had my lunch, I went to the library and did my math homework. Have I told you how much I like math? It's great. I'm sure it's mostly because of Sonika ma'am, who's such a good teacher. Like, she's the only one who uses props and field trips to teach us. Her classes are fun and the only place where my mind is distracted from thoughts of Rukmini and the demon woman. I was dozing on a Nancy Drew novel when the librarian gently shook me awake. I smiled sheepishly as I realized that it was closing time. The sun had gone back to its hiding place, vacating its space for the moon. I must have slept for a good 3 hours or so, because my neck hurt, but the rest of my body felt refreshed. I put my books in my bag and left the library, making my way over to the mess. The only time I would spend in my room was the curfew time, when we were supposed to sleep. Not a second more. So after dinner, I decided to go to Sister Mercy's house to see what she was doing, but she wasn't there. The way our school is built is that we have the school building in the middle of the boys and girls hostels, with administrative buildings and the houses of the teachers surrounding them. It's a pretty safe area, apart from the odd ghostly woman in your bedroom. Maybe she was in the administrative building? The security guards shouted at me when they saw me, and I scampered off back to the hostel, dreading what was to come later that night. Carol and Vrinda were busy giggling away at something when I entered our room. They stopped when they saw me, whispered something to each other, and began giggling harder than before. I really hate it when they do that. It's so annoying, but their presence was still oddly comforting, even though I knew that the woman would still come at night, regardless of whether they were here or not. I thought about waking them up at night when she comes, but what if they can't see her? What if she disappears? I would end up getting made fun of again, and there was always the possibility that she could attack them if they saw her. I don't hate them enough to knowingly put them in harm's way. Good girls should know when to keep their mouths shut. I wonder who wrote that, and why. Was it a warning? Was the woman warning me not to tell anyone about her? Or was this S someone else entirely? I bet Nancy Drew could figure that out. But I'm no Nancy Drew. I'm just a friendless, mentally ill loser, curled up in her old blanket. I really shouldn't have slept in the library this evening, because I was wide awake now. The ticking of the clock sounded like swords striking each other, and the strange buzzing in my ear was near deafening. Have you ever noticed that sound? You can hear it when there are little to no other sounds, like thousands of bees buzzing around near your eardrums. I once focused on that sound so hard, I gave myself a headache. I felt something tugging at my bedsheet and froze. There she was. I felt a certain weight on the bottom of my bed. She must be dragging herself up. I was utterly frightened, but to sate some weird curiosity, opened my eyes and looked at my feet. She placed her head on top of her hands, like a screwed up puppy, and began lifelessly staring at me. I whimpered as I saw her eyes, move when she caught me looking at her. Drawing my blanket over my head, I brought my feet up and forcefully shut my eyes. Is it really going to be like this? I wondered. Is she just going to stay there and stare for the whole night? My fear began to fade as time passed, and I started to feel angry. Why doesn't she just go away? What does she want from me? I used that anger to push down my fear. To my own astonishment, I spoke to her. "What do you want?" I whispered angrily. Her eyes widened and her mouth fell open, as if she was shocked someone had spoken to her. If that wasn't terrifying enough, her head then violently snapped back with a sickening crunch, such that her neck was the only thing visible to me. Her hands went backwards and above her head, and she disappeared from sight. I quickly got up to see what she was doing, and saw that she was crawling backwards on her hands and feet. Her head went even further back, doing almost a 360 as it popped out from beneath her legs as she continued to crawl backwards. Her body passed through the closed door, and when it was halfway in, she stopped and her eye locked onto me, sending shivers down my spine. Was she calling me? Does she want me to accompany her? It might have been a terrible idea, but I decided to follow her. I got down from my bed as quietly as I could, taking extra precaution to make sure I didn't wake up Carol or Brenda. After quickly putting on my slippers, I pushed the door open. The door moaned and creaked as I opened it, and I almost squealed in panic, but I was safe. My roommates were still sleeping. I saw the woman's weirdly contorted body at the end of the dimly lit hallway, near the stairs. Where was she taking me? Who in their right mind decides to follow a demon in the dead of night? Well, everyone in my life thinks that I'm not of the right mind, so there really isn't anyone more qualified to be making a bad decision like this. As I approached the stairs, I saw her slither down the railing. She moved in such a bizarre manner, as if she didn't have complete control of her nigh unbreakable body. I tiptoed my way downstairs, using my phone's flashlight to light up my path. Lada, our security guard, was asleep on the bench near her desk. I slipped past her and made my way outside of the hostel. A thin fog hung on the chilly winter air, making me glad I was wearing a thick jacket. I could hear dogs barking and howling in the distance. I looked around for the half-faced woman, getting anxious that I had lost her, before I spotted her in front of one of the teachers' houses. As she saw me, she turned and walked inside the house. For a second, I hesitated. Should I really be breaking into a teacher's house? I decided that this was far too important and that I would face the consequences later. Maybe I'll get some answers tonight. The nameplate stated that the house belonged to Prakash Sharma, our gym teacher. Was he involved in what was happening to me? Granted, that the disappearances always happen the night of the weekly checks carried out by him and Sister Rose, but I'd never considered that he himself could have been involved, especially after I started seeing this demonic lady in my room. Best not to make too many assumptions. I shivered as I walked into the open door of his house. If I get caught, I would be in more trouble than I had ever been in my life. The house was completely dark and silent. I quickly surmised that he wasn't here. Why was his house not locked then? Did the woman open it, or did he really forget to lock it? I don't know. The jingling of keys brought me out of my chain of thoughts, and I walked toward the source of that sound. straight into Prakash Sher's bedroom. I swung my phone around and took in the scene in front of me. The woman was nowhere to be seen, and I don't think I'll be seeing her again this evening. A painting on one of the walls had been brought down, revealing a safe embedded into the wall, with a key dangling from it. It was a little too high for me to reach, so I used one of the chairs in the room to elevate myself and open the safe. On top of a stack of papers were a bunch of strange items: a wristwatch, a stuffed animal, a headband. Wait a second, I know that headband. It belongs to Rukmini. What was that doing here? I shuddered as I considered the implications. It's still hard for me to put into words, but did Prakash Sir kill my friend? How about all of these other items? Did they belong to the other kids? What was he doing with them? I pulled out the stack of papers and began reading them. The title of the first page I pulled out was Psychiatric Evaluation. What in the world? I read my name. It was about me. Present illness. Patient has been diagnosed with early onset schizophrenia. She has exhibited signs of hallucinations, delusions, and excessive fears. She remembers everything clearly, not just brief flashes. Clearly, the memory alterations did not work on her. You should be pleased. She is far more powerful than you realized. Everything in the brackets was handwritten. Why did Prakash Sir have Rachna Ma'am's notes? Were they working together? What was happening here? I continued reading. Patient's activity level. Attention and concentration were observed to be within normal levels. Hypnosis doesn't work on her. I can put her in a drowsy state at the most. This is a good sign. Medication prescribed. Olanzapine. Not this, I actually just gave her a mild sedative. I could feel tears forming in my eyes. I was so confused and scared. What were Rachna Ma'am and Prakash Sir doing to me? I only knew one thing. I have to get these papers to Sister Mercy as soon as possible. I took those papers and shoved them in my jacket when I heard footsteps coming from outside. Oh no. He's back. My blood ran cold. I didn't want to find out how he would react if he found me like this. "Who's there?" he shouted. What do I do? What do I do? I can't really escape through the front door now. He'll spot me in a second. The windows were my only option, but would I have enough time to open them? I made a split-second decision and quickly shut the bedroom door. I figured that by the time he finds a way to open it, I would have escaped through the windows. He slammed into the door as soon as I had shut it. "Open it," he screamed. "Open the fucking door." He started banging on the door as I made my way to the door. "Open it right now." He, growled? "I'll kill you. Open it." I ran to the windows and began to open them when Prakash Sir let out a blood-curdling scream. Complete silence descended on the room and I hesitated. What is he doing now? I got my answer in the form of animalistic growling. He slammed into the door again, this time so hard that it shook on its hinges, and again, but the door held on. I put my leg over the window and was about to climb out when the door shattered, sending splinters flying everywhere. A heavy, clawed, and furry hand reached out and opened the door. As I fell outside and began scrambling along the grass, I gingerly got up, and soon heard his feet pounding on the floor as he slowly walked around the bedroom. He's not human. He's not human. No way he can be a human like that. I quickly got back on my feet and began running towards my hostel. I could hear him behind me, snarling and growling, and snapping his teeth with every breath as he gained on me with unnatural speed. I hadn't even made it to the main road when he crashed into me, making me slam into the ground. I scraped my hands and feet really badly, but that wasn't even a concern at the moment. I turned around and looked at the monster hunting me. His large frame loomed over me and was being illuminated by the bright moon. Sharp fangs protruded from his lower lip, and a long, sinewy, blood-red tongue hung loosely between them. His face was much larger than it usually was, but apart from the fangs, he looked surprisingly human. He was built like a truck, muscles so large they had ripped his shirt open, exposing his disgusting hairy chest. This can't be real, but the harsh crunching of gravel underneath the monster's feet reminded me that it was. I whimpered as he picked me up, threw me over his shoulders, and carried me back to his house. I wanted to scream and call for help, but was so beyond frightened that I couldn't even open my mouth. I settled for softly sobbing on this thing's shoulder. He covered the distance back to his house in a matter of seconds. I hadn't even begun to process the night's events when he had me securely tied to a chair in his dining room. I watched in stunned silence as he transformed back to his usual self, with some painful pops and crackles. "How did you get in here?" he asked after drinking a glass of water. I didn't reply. Good girls should know when to keep their mouths shut. "The door was locked," he continued, "and so was the safe. How did you open it?" "What do you want with me?" I sobbed. "All in good time," he answered and made his way over to the fridge. "You really are quite resourceful, aren't you?" He took out what looked like a bag of meat and went into the kitchen, soon coming back with some bread. "What did you do to Rukmini and the others?" I asked after I'd stopped crying. "What do you think?" he smirked. He took the meat out of the bag and began making sandwiches. "And if you don't do as I say, your beloved Sister Mercy is going to be next," he added. I shuddered. God, please end this nightmare. I just want to go back to my room. He walked over to me, with a sandwich and a plate. "Eat," he said. "Growing girls need to keep their strength up." I shook my head. "I'm not hungry," I whispered. "Eat." He slammed his hand on the table. I took a bite, immediately scrunching my face at the disgusting taste. "What is this?" I asked, almost on the verge of throwing up. "Why, dear Nana," he said, "I am disappointed. Here I was thinking you would recognize the taste of Piggy."